Well, hello again. My name is Thomas Smith. I'm pastoral associate here at Holy Spirit Catholic Community, and we're excited to have you back again to join us as together we continue to explore our Paschal mystery icon here at St. Anthony Chapel. We want to help you see its connection to not only your faith and the Mass, but also your personal lives. Each of the scenes here, of course, display God's saving plan from Palm Sunday all the way to Pentecost, our patronal feast here at Holy Spirit. All of these panels, of course, every scene is part of what the Church calls, as we mentioned before, the Paschal mystery, one saving mystery that has many, many parts. And we also discussed what Paschal means. Paschal, of course, means Passover. Well, if you've read the book of Exodus or you've ever seen the movie The Ten Commandments, or maybe you prefer the animated film The Prince of Egypt, you have a general sense of the larger story of the first Pascha, or first Passover. The Hebrew people are enslaved to Egypt. God sets them free by his great power. And when death, you remember, passes over Egypt that night, during the first Passover meal, the Hebrew people are saved by what? They're saved by the shed blood of a lamb on their doorposts. Death has no power over them because of the blood of the lamb. Well, when the day of Passover came around 2,000 years ago, which we now call Holy Thursday, Jesus' disciples make arrangements to celebrate that miracle of the first Passover with a commemorative meal. Something that Jews still do today. In fact, this week, all over the world, Jewish people will celebrate the Passover. Well, once Jesus and his disciples gathered for the meal, he said this to them. He said, "How I have longed to celebrate this Passover with you." Because Jesus knows this will be like no other Passover before it. This Passover, Jesus knows, this meal is what we also call the Last Supper, or the institution of the Eucharist. So we see into that scene in this central panel below the cross and above the tabernacle. Now, as you look at this image, note the apostles' orientation. They're all focused on Jesus. Their eyes draw our eyes to the Lord at the center of what will be a miraculous meal. When you get a moment, next time you're able to come into the chapel, come closer, and you'll notice a subtle illumination below the eyes of the disciples, as if they have a candle inside of them. This is an artistic way that Cindy, the artist, reflects what John 1:9 says, that Jesus is the true light that enlightens everyone. And as his disciples, we can choose to carry and convey that light within us, or we can reject it. There's one figure in the scene you may see who has rejected Christ's offer of light and love. That's Judas Iscariot. Do you see him in the image? The illumination from his eyes is nearly gone. And you'll notice there's no halo over his head. And look at his orientation. He is turned away from the Lord, grasping the bag of 30 pieces of silver that he accepted in payment for betraying his master, Jesus. And where is he gazing? Tragically, he's looking upon the consequences of his betrayal, the suffering of his master. And that suffering is going to take place in the very garden where the betrayal is going to happen. That garden we call Gethsemane. We'll look at that in our next session. Now come back to Jesus at the table. The gesture of Jesus' hand here is easily missed. His fingers form 4 Greek letters. It's kind of like sign language all at once. And those 4 letters formed by his hand create what is called a Christogram. It's an abbreviation of one of Jesus' names in Greek. And so he is blessing us who are observing this icon and the apostles present with his holy name. In this setting, he is giving them also the power to act in his name. Because the Last Supper is not only the institution of the Eucharist, the miraculous meal, but the institution of the priesthood, the power Christ committed to the church to continue this sacrifice down through the ages. The priest, acting in the person of Christ, repeats the Lord's words, which affect the very thing they communicate. This is my body. This is my blood. It's not simply a remembrance or a rote repetition of words. When a priest says this, it's not merely a sign or a symbol. It's more than a memorial or a metaphor. The bread and wine are transformed to become really, truly, and substantially Christ's body and blood. And in a burst of love on this altar in front of me, that mystery, Christ's offer of light and life and love, his very self, is made available to us. It's a fulfillment of his promise, I will be with you always, even until the end of time. And so that's why the tabernacle, which holds his body and blood, is integrated into the Last Supper icon. Notice how the tabernacle is becoming a three-dimensional element emerging from the two-dimensional scene. And finally, it's easy to miss one last element of this central panel, the blue pitcher and basin in the lower left-hand corner of the Last Supper. Notice how it's the same color as the vessels holding the body and blood of Christ above. Now, why is that? Because we're intended to see a connection. In John's Gospel, we get the added detail from the Last Supper that Jesus not only celebrates this miraculous meal, but he takes the humble role of a servant and he washes his disciples' feet. So matched to his words regarding the Eucharist, remember what he says, do this in memory of me, is what he says after washing their feet. Do this to others as I have done it to you. Now that's significant. This sacrament and our service, the washing of others' feet, are united. Nourished by the Eucharist, we are called to look for every opportunity to wash one another's feet. That is to engage in loving service, and this time more than ever calls us to do that. During this time that we are separated from community and communion is not a time to despair. It's a time to recognize something which has always been true. You are a temple of Jesus. You carry him within you at all times. Your lives are living liturgies. And by virtue of your baptism, you are privileged to carry Christ's light and love to all around us. Like the tabernacle, you become the three-dimensional extension of this icon. You are the icon of Christ to a world that more than ever is in desperate need of him. This time, this extraordinary time that we are in is unique and incomparable. It's our time that we are called to be Christ for the world, to be a church that is deployed, making him manifest. May we take up the challenge of this time. May we be Christ to all we meet this day.